There are certain kinds of pain that don't have names in our everyday language. Not the pain of loss, or failure, or heartbreak. Those have names, those have greeting cards, those have a social script that helps you move through them. People know what to do when you're grieving someone. They know what to say when a relationship ends or a job falls apart. But there's another category of pain. Quieter, stranger, more difficult to explain. The kind of pain that arrives not when things are falling apart, but when something inside you is finally, irreversibly waking up. The kind that has no name in polite conversation. The kind that sends people to therapists who look at them blankly, or to friends who mean well, but ultimately suggest a holiday or a new hobby. If you've been on this path, if something cracked you open and the world has never looked quite the same since, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And what I want to do today is name it. All of it. The specific, particular, deeply human aches that come with the territory of waking up. Not to be dramatic about it, not to make suffering romantic, but because there is something genuinely healing about having your experience reflected back to you accurately. About someone looking you in the eye and saying, "Yes, I know what that feels like, and no, you are not crazy." So here are 7 deep pains that only the spiritually awake experience. And if even one of these lands for you, if even one of these makes you feel less alone, then this is worth everything. The first pain is the grief of losing a self you didn't even know you were attached to. Everyone understands grief when it comes to losing a person, or a relationship, or a place. But nobody prepares you for the grief of losing yourself. Not death, not that kind of losing. The quieter, stranger kind. The slow dissolving of the personality you spent decades constructing. The values that guided you. The ambitions that drove you. The version of success you were chasing with such conviction. One day you look at all of it and it feels like someone else's life. Like you picked up the wrong coat on the way out. And the grief of that is real. Completely real. Even if the self that's dissolving was never fully who you were, even if it was mostly costume, you wore it for a long time, it was familiar, it had its comforts, the social world recognized it and rewarded it, and now it's going. And nobody around you seems to understand why you'd mourn something like that. They look at you, and you look fine. You still have your name, your face, your history. What exactly have you lost? Everything, you want to say. And nothing. Both at once. The mystics were very clear about this. Ego death, the falling away of the constructed self, is described across every tradition as one of the most disorienting experiences available to human consciousness. Not because what replaces it is bad, but because the transition has no map. You're crossing a river, and the old bank is disappearing behind you, and the new one hasn't come into view yet. And you're swimming in the middle, and the current is strong, and you're supposed to find that liberating. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it just feels like drowning. If you're in that middle place right now, I want you to know that the grief is appropriate. The grief is honest. Let yourself feel it completely, because trying to rush past it or spiritually bypass it will only make it resurface later, louder. The second pain is the unbearable weight of seeing what others cannot see. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from perception, from seeing the machinery behind the curtain that most people are still accepting as the whole picture. The way the culture manufactures desire. The way the ego hijacks every conversation, every relationship, every political moment. The way almost every human interaction involves 2 people defending their stories at each other and calling it connection. The way people are sleepwalking through their one life, completely convinced they are awake. And you see it? Clearly, sometimes painfully clearly. And what do you do with that? You can't unsee it, you can't go back to the comfortable blur. But you also can't walk around announcing what you see, because that is insufferable. And also because the seeing, if it's genuine, comes with the humbling recognition that you spent most of your life equally asleep. You were in there too. You were doing the same dance. The only difference is something woke you up, and for whatever reason it hasn't happened yet for the person standing in front of you. But the weight of it is real. The weight of watching someone you love make the same self-defeating choice for the 15th time, and knowing that if you say something, it will land as criticism rather than compassion. The weight of sitting in a conversation that is entirely, effortlessly surface, not because the people are shallow, but because depth requires a willingness to be uncomfortable, and not everyone is there yet. The weight of watching the world collectively agree on priorities that feel, from where you're standing, like a beautiful, elaborate distraction from the only things that actually matter. You carry this largely alone. And that is its own particular kind of heavy. The third pain is the collapse of motivation, and not understanding why. Before the awakening, you had fuel. Maybe it was ambition. Maybe it was the need for approval. Maybe it was competition, or fear, or the relentless drive to prove something to someone who told you early on that you weren't enough. Whatever it was, it worked. It got you out of bed. It kept you moving. It generated momentum. And then one day, without warning, the fuel runs out. Not because you've become lazy. Not because you've given up. Not because you're depressed, though it can feel indistinguishable from depression. But because the engine that was running on ego fuel, on fear, on the desperate need to become something, to arrive somewhere, to finally be enough, has run out of the very thing that was powering it. The awakening dissolved the fear, or at least loosened its grip. And without the fear, the old ambitions have nothing to run on. And this is terrifying, especially if your whole identity, your whole sense of self-worth, was built around your productivity and your drive and your ability to make things happen. Suddenly you're standing in the middle of your life with no idea what you actually want, not what you're supposed to want, not what would impress people, not what would finally make your parents proud or your critics quiet. What do you actually want? And the honest answer, for a long time, is, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And living inside that not knowing, in a world that expects you to have a plan and a direction and a 5-year vision, is one of the most quietly agonizing places a person can inhabit. The fourth pain is the longing for a depth of connection that almost no one around you seems to want. This one lives in the chest, a low, persistent ache. You have been cracked open. Something in you has been made raw and real and honest in a way that changes what you need from other people. You don't need entertainment anymore. You don't need pleasant. You need real. You need the conversation that goes underneath the surface and stays there. You need the person who is willing to talk about what actually scares them, what they actually regret, what they actually believe when they strip away all the performance and the positioning and the carefully managed self-presentation. You need contact. True, unmediated, unperformed human contact. And you look around, at your friendships, your family dinners, your social occasions, and you find that almost nobody is willing to go there. Not because they're incapable, but because going there requires a willingness to be vulnerable that feels genuinely dangerous to most people. The social contract has very specific rules about how deep you're allowed to go, how honest you're allowed to be, how much reality is permitted in polite company, and you keep bumping up against those rules. You keep wanting to say the true thing and saying the acceptable thing instead. You keep waiting for someone to drop the script and they keep holding it tighter. And you go home, and you sit with this ache, this specific, persistent, beautiful, and terrible longing for a kind of intimacy that the world doesn't seem to have much appetite for. That longing is not neediness. That longing is not dysfunction. That longing is your soul knowing exactly what it's made for and refusing to be satisfied with less. The fifth pain is the silent suffering of living between two worlds. You haven't fully left the old life, but you're no longer fully in it either. You still have the job, the relationships, the routines, the obligations that were built by and for the person you used to be, and you show up for all of it. You do your best, but there's a persistent sense of wearing clothes that no longer fit, of speaking a language that is almost your own, but not quite, of standing slightly outside your own life, watching yourself move through it, wondering how long you can sustain the distance between who you're performing and who you actually are. This is one of the most exhausting places to live, because it requires a constant, invisible effort. The effort of translation, converting your actual interior experience into something socially acceptable before you speak. The effort of participation in systems and conversations and priorities that feel, from where you now stand, like they're missing the point. The effort of maintaining the external architecture of a life that was designed for someone who no longer fully exists. And you can't simply blow it all up. You have responsibilities. You have people who depend on you. You have a mortgage, or a career, or children, or all of the above. You can't just walk off the stage because the play no longer feels true, so you stay, and you play your role, and you carry the quiet, unnamed weight of the gap between your inner and outer life. And sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, that weight just lands on you completely, and you sit with it, and you breathe, and you keep going. The sixth pain is the terror of your own depth. This one is rarely talked about, but I think it might be the most important. Awakening doesn't just show you beautiful things. It doesn't just open you to presence and love and the quiet miracle of being alive. It also shows you the full range of what's inside you, including the things you spent years, decades, carefully looking away from. The grief you never let yourself feel, the rage that was never safe to express, the parts of yourself that your family, your culture, your religion told you were unacceptable and must be hidden and must never be spoken of. When the constructed self begins to dissolve, the things it was constructed to contain start to move. And that can be genuinely frightening, to feel the full force of your own sadness, finally unmuted after years of suppression, to feel the anger that was never allowed to exist, to encounter in yourself a darkness that doesn't match the spiritual story you were starting to build. The idea of yourself as someone who has transcended all that, moved beyond it, become light. The truth is that genuine spiritual depth includes the shadow. It includes the full catastrophe of being human, and the willingness to go into your own depths, not to wallow, not to perform suffering, but to genuinely meet what's down there with honesty and compassion, is some of the bravest work a person can do. But it's terrifying, and it's lonely. And there are moments when you catch a glimpse of how deep it actually goes, how much unprocessed pain, how much inherited trauma, how much unlived life is stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the wordless places, and you have to decide, consciously, to keep going. To not slam the door, to not pick up a drink or a phone or a distraction and bury it again under noise. The willingness to face your own depth is the whole path, and the terror of it is the price of the path. And nobody gets to skip it. The seventh pain is loving a world you can no longer be unconscious inside of. This is the pain that doesn't fit neatly into any category. It's not quite grief, and it's not quite longing, and it's not quite loneliness. It's some alchemy of all three, and it sits at the very center of what it means to be awake in a world that is largely still asleep. Because here's the thing about awakening that doesn't get said enough. It doesn't make you love less. If anything, and this is the great paradox, it makes you love more. More completely, more honestly, more without the transactional quality that most love carries. You start to love people, not for what they give you, not for who they make you feel like, but for the simple, astounding fact of their existence. You start to see the beauty in people even when, especially when, they cannot see it in themselves. And that kind of love, open, wide, unclenching, is also its own form of pain. Because the world is full of suffering. And when your heart is open, the suffering lands. You can't scroll past it the way you used to. You can't compartmentalize it, quarantine it, keep it at a safe emotional distance. The child you read about in the news, that lands in your body. The friend who is slowly disappearing inside their own pain, that lands. The stranger on the street who is carrying something enormous and invisible, that lands too. And you can't harden yourself against it, because hardening yourself would mean closing the same heart that gives your life whatever meaning it currently has. So you stay open, and the world keeps landing, and you learn, slowly, imperfectly, with many failures, how to be a compassionate presence in a suffering world without being destroyed by it. How to feel everything without being consumed by everything. How to stay soft without being broken by your own softness. That balance, that daily, imperfect, courageous balance, is the work of a lifetime. None of these 7 pains are signs that the awakening is failing. None of them are evidence that you've taken a wrong turn, that you need to go back, that you were better off before. They are the cost of seeing clearly. They are the necessary friction of becoming genuinely human rather than just performing humanity. And I want to leave you with this. The fact that you feel these things, the grief, the longing, the weight, the terror, the love that breaks your heart open, means that something real is happening in you. Most people live an entire life on the surface and never once feel the depth of what you carry on an average Tuesday. That is not a burden. That is, in the truest sense of the word, a gift. A difficult, costly, sometimes overwhelming gift. But a gift nonetheless. You are not too sensitive, you are not too much, you are not broken by your own depth. You are someone who is fully alive in a world that is still learning what that means, and the world needs you, not despite these pains, because of them.